1967 versus 2006. Parody versus perfection. Two Casino Royale films. But only one can walk away as a true Bond. James Bond. In 1967, David Niven starred in a parody of Ian Fleming's first James Bond novel from 1953. That parody was called Casino Royale, where an unofficial cooperative of intelligence heads convinced Bond to come out of retirement to investigate the deaths and disappearances of international spies. 39 years later, Daniel Craig would properly announce himself onto the acting scene with what many people consider to be the greatest James Bond film ever made. And it is excellent. However, with two films of the same name in the same franchise, the question arises as to which one is better. Well, that's why I'm here today. Welcome to Popcorn Program. Here's our look at original versus remake, Casino Royale. Which is better? Pop up! So let's begin with why the original from 1967, Casino Royale, could be considered the better film. First off is that it is completely unique within the Bond universe. Every other Bond film follows a fairly similar formula. You know, the exotic locations, the cunning villains, the Bond girls, the fancy tech and gadgets, and a classic style. Whereas this one mixes it up a little bit. It has multiple James Bonds, has more absurd and surreal storytelling, and is a total parody of spy tropes. Due to this, it actually stands out as the most original and experimental Bond film ever made. Number two is that it embraces comedy fully instead of trying to mix the tones. Where most Bond films attempt to balance, or do manage to successfully balance, action and humour, this one goes all in on the chaos and the comedy. The slapstick humour, the fourth wall breaking energy, and the pure parody of espionage cliches. If you value comedy and creativity, this version commits harder than any other ever could. Number three is that it's bold and creative. The 1967 version is wild in terms of its presentation. The use of bright, almost psychedelic sets, the over-the-top costumes, and the use of constant visual experiments all come together to help it feel like a piece of 60s pop art and not just a film, and that distinctiveness matters. Number four is that it satirises Bond itself. Instead of just being a Bond story, it questions Bond in several ways. It mocks the idea of being just one perfect spy. It plays with identity and absurdity in many different ways, and it highlights just how ridiculous the concept can be. This makes it one of the only Bond-related films that's actually very aware of just how silly the concept of James Bond can be. And the reason number five is that it is very unpredictable, as you genuinely don't know what's going to come next, and that is a good thing. Unlike most Bond films where you tend to know the structure of the film, this film has it where the story constantly shifts, the characters come and go, and the tone flips wildly throughout. That chaos makes it a more surprising and ultimately more memorable experience. As it is something completely different though, then it can be argued that this is the better film out of the two Casino Royale films. But now, let's take a look at why Casino Royale is the better film out of Casino Royale or Casino Royale. Let's dig in. Reason number one is that it completely reinvented James Bond. Before 2006, Bond had become a bit cartoonish. There were invisible cars, very over-the-top gadgets, and the stakes were a lot less grounded. Then in 2006, Casino Royale came in and said, what if Bond was real? There was a grittier tone, more emotional depth, and a vulnerable, more human Bond. That allowed it to not only succeed, but also to save the franchise. That brings us nicely on to number two, which is Daniel Craig delivers a definitive Bond performance. Daniel Craig brought something new to the James Bond name. What he brought was a physical, brutal presence. He brought a much stronger emotional range, especially with Vesper. All in all, he was a more dangerous, less polished Bond, which made the version feel like someone who earns the title of 007, making his iconic line of the names Bond, James Bond, feel truly earned. Reason number three is that it tells a focused, coherent story. Unlike the chaos of the 1967 version of Casino Royale, the 2006 version brings a clear, focused narrative. Strong pacing throughout and has a really good high stakes throughout the film. You're not just watching scenes, you're following a tight, compelling story being told. Reason number four is that the emotional core actually hits really well, and it hits really hard as well. The relationship between Bond and Vesper isn't just there, it actually matters. The relationship that grows throughout feels natural and important, which means that the betrayal, the breaking of the trust and the subsequent loss, it really gives Bond something rare, which is real emotional consequences to his actions. Reason number 5 is it delivers iconic, grounded action. There are no gimmicks, just raw intensity. You have the cool parkour chase opening, the brutal fight scenes throughout, and the incredible tension created by the high stakes of the poker game throughout. The action feels really quite dangerous, real and earned, and not just flashy or for the sake of being there. The 1967 Casino Royale is bold, creative and completely unique, where the 2006 version is sharper, deeper, and ultimately, at least according to me, the better film. It's not just a great Bond movie, but one of the greatest reboots ever made. The 1967 version is creative chaos, but the 2006 version is controlled perfection. One is really quite interesting, whereas the other is unforgettable. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Think I've completely lost my mind. Good, tell me in the comment section down below. If you want more breakdowns like this across the Casino Royale and beyond, hit subscribe because we're just getting started. That is all for now, so if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and click the subscribe button if you are new around here. That's all for now, so I'd like to thank you for watching, and we'll see you later. Pop pop!